Veronica Sterling had curated a life of flawless surfaces, a gleaming testament to inherited wealth and meticulously managed public perception. Her penthouse apartment, high above Central Park, was a study in minimalist luxury, all cool marble, brushed steel, and abstract art. Each morning, she moved through it like a ghost in a gallery, her movements as polished as the custom Venetian plaster walls. Today, a crisp autumn Tuesday, was no different. The air outside held a deceptive chill, but inside the climate control hummed a soothing 82 degrees. She slipped into a tailored Chanel suit, the fabric clinging to her frame with an almost liquid grace, its deep sapphire hue perfectly complementing her icy blue eyes. Every detail, from the perfectly coiffed blonde bob to the subtle diamond studs winking at her ears, screamed effortless sophistication. Her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a satisfying confirmation of her power. She was due at the Sterling Foundation's annual strategy meeting, a precursor to the prestigious Reed Philanthropic Trust's gala next month, an event where she hoped to cement a massive partnership that would elevate her family's already considerable legacy to unparalleled heights. She had spent weeks perfecting her pitch, not just the financial projections, but the narrative, a compelling story of community outreach, environmental stewardship, and social uplift. Irony, she sometimes mused, was the least appreciated of virtues. Downstairs, her chauffeur, a stoic man named Arthur, who had served the Sterling family for 20 years, waited by the sleek obsidian Mercedes-Benz S-Class. The car itself was an extension of her brand, understated, powerful, and utterly beyond reproach. As she settled into the plush leather seats, the scent of premium coffee, brewed just the way she liked it, a double-shot oat milk latte with a whisper of vanilla, filled the opulent interior. She took a slow sip, savoring the warmth, the bitterness, the carefully calibrated sweetness. Her world was a symphony of such curated sensations. The traffic, however, was not. A typical New York crawl along Fifth Avenue, a relentless tide of yellow cabs and service vehicles. Veronica sighed, a delicate puff of air that barely disturbed her perfect coiffure. She pulled out her tablet, reviewing her speech notes. Integrity, accountability, making a tangible difference in the lives of ordinary Americans. The words felt solid, substantial, weighty. She practiced her delivery in a low murmur, her voice a cultivated contralto designed to command attention. Arthur, accustomed to her rehearsals, kept his gaze fixed on the road, a silent, unmoving sentinel. As they edged past the lush greenery of a small public park, a splash of vibrant, almost defiant green against the muted cityscape, Veronica's eyes drifted from her tablet. A woman, clad in a faded blue uniform and thick utility gloves, was meticulously sweeping fallen leaves from the perimeter of a public bench. Her back was to the street, her movements rhythmic, almost meditative. Her hair, a practical dark braid, was tucked beneath a worn baseball cap, and her frame, though slender, conveyed a surprising strength as she pushed her broom. Veronica barely registered her as anything more than part of the urban landscape, another cog in the vast, unseen machinery that kept her city pristine. Her coffee cup, now half empty, felt suddenly cumbersome. A crumpled napkin, still bearing the faint imprint of her lipstick, lay beside it. She glanced around the car. No trash receptacle in easy reach. Arthur had placed a small, discreet waste bin in the passenger footwell, but it was a stretch, and frankly, beneath her. Her gaze returned to the woman in the park, now bending to pick up a stray piece of litter that had escaped her broom. Someone else's job, Veronica thought, a flicker of irritation passing through her. That's what they're paid for, isn't it? To clean up after everyone else. The thought was so automatic, so ingrained, it barely registered as a conscious decision. With a barely perceptible shrug, Veronica pressed the button to lower her window. The crisp autumn air rushed in, momentarily disrupting the car's perfect climate. She extended her arm, elegant and unhesitating, and with a swift, almost graceful flick of her wrist, she tossed the coffee cup and crumpled napkin out. It landed with a soft, almost soundless thud on the pavement, a few feet from where the cleaning woman, Elena Rodriguez, was now straightening up, her back still to the car. Elena paused. She hadn't seen the Mercedes, but the soft thud was unmistakable. Another piece of careless refuse. A small, familiar sigh escaped her lips. This was her life, picking up after the hurried, the indifferent, the privileged. She turned, her gaze falling on the discarded items. Just beyond them, the black Mercedes glided slowly forward, its window already closing, the occupant a blur. No eye contact, no acknowledgement, just the casual disregard that cut deeper than any insult. Elena's shoulders slumped almost imperceptibly. She walked over, knelt down, and picked up the cup and napkin, tucking them into the large canvas bag she carried, already half full of similar discards. Her hands, calloused and strong, trembled ever so slightly as she continued her work, the quiet indignity of familiar companion. Unbeknownst to Veronica or even Elena, another pair of eyes had witnessed the entire scene. Dr. Evelyn Reed, chairperson of the Reed Philanthropic Trust, known for her sharp intellect and even sharper moral compass, sat in the passenger seat of a dark sedan, stalled in the lane next to Veronica's Mercedes. Dr. Reed wasn't on her way to a meeting. She was on her way from a very early morning volunteer session at a community garden, her sensible tweed coat still smelling faintly of damp earth. She had seen the Mercedes, recognized the Sterling Foundation logo on the side of the building they had just passed, and then her gaze had been drawn to the casual, dismissive gesture. She saw the cup tumble, saw Elena's silent, weary acceptance. A slight frown creased Dr. Reed's brow, her lips pursed into a thin, unreadable line. She didn't need the license plate number, the car, the building, the timing, the woman herself. It was all crystal clear. She reached into her bag, not for a phone, but for a small notebook, and made a single, precise entry. Her world, unlike Veronica's, was not built on curated surfaces, but on the bedrock of character. Veronica, still oblivious, had already turned her attention back to her speech, convinced that her morning was proceeding exactly as planned. Her flawless facade remained utterly unbroken, yet a tiny, almost invisible crack had just appeared, seen only by the discerning eye of someone whose judgment truly mattered. The Sterling Foundation's quarterly strategy meeting unfolded with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Veronica, seated at the head of the polished mahogany table, commanded the room with an authority that belied her 36 years. Her presentation, a meticulously crafted PowerPoint detailing potential philanthropic initiatives and the projected growth of the foundation's impact, was delivered with flawless confidence. She spoke of synergy and scalable solutions and empowering underserved communities, her voice ringing with conviction. Her colleagues, mostly older men and women who had watched her grow from a precocious intern to a formidable leader, nodded approvingly. They admired her drive, her sharp business acumen, her ability to secure impressive fundraising numbers. "Our partnership with the Reed Philanthropic Trust," she announced, her gaze sweeping across the room, "represents a pivotal moment. Dr. Evelyn Reed's endorsement alone would elevate our profile immeasurably. But beyond that, her organization's reach, their established credibility in ethical giving, it aligns perfectly with our vision of genuine, impactful change." She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle. "We're not just writing checks, ladies and gentlemen. We are changing lives." A ripple of agreement went through the room. Veronica allowed herself a small, internal smile. Changing lives, she thought, and securing our legacy. The two, in her mind, were inextricably linked. Meanwhile, a few miles downtown, Elena Rodriguez was immersed in her own version of impactful change, though her efforts would never merit a PowerPoint presentation. Her afternoon shift had taken her to the sprawling grounds of the city's largest public library, a grand neoclassical edifice frequented by students, homeless individuals, and everyone in between. She moved through the manicured pathways with purpose, emptying overflowing trash cans, scrubbing graffiti from a stone wall, her small, slender figure a stark contrast to the imposing architecture. The chill of the morning had given way to a weak autumn sun, casting long shadows across the grass. She pulled out her worn flip phone during a quick break, fingers clumsy with the utility gloves. "Hola, mi amor," she whispered into the phone, her voice softening immediately. Her daughter, Sophia, was at school. "Did you remember your lunch? And your book for the history project?" Sophia's excited chatter filled Elena's ear. It was a familiar ritual, this daily check-in, a lifeline to the reason she worked so hard, often through aches and pains she wouldn't admit to. "See, Misha? I'll be home as soon as I can. We'll make your favorite pupusas tonight." A pang of longing for her small, brightly colored apartment, for the warmth of her kitchen, went through her. The image of the discarded coffee cup, casually flung from the luxury car that morning, flickered in her mind. It wasn't anger she felt, but a deep, weary acceptance of the gulf between her world and theirs. She knew the woman in the car hadn't even seen her. Not really. She was just part of the scenery. It was a feeling she was all too familiar with. Across town, Dr. Evelyn Reed, settled in her spacious, book-lined office, was having a conversation with her protege, Marcus Thorne, a bright-eyed young executive eager to make his mark. They were discussing a smaller grant application. "Marcus," Dr. Reed said, her voice gentle but firm, "remember that true philanthropy isn't just about the dollar amount. It's about the spirit behind the giving. It's about recognizing the inherent dignity in every individual, regardless of their station. Sometimes, the most telling acts are the ones performed when no one thinks they're watching." Marcus nodded, scribbling notes. He knew Dr. Reed had an uncanny ability to read people, to see past the polished exterior to the genuine core. This subtle emphasis on character was a micro-trigger, a quiet ripple in the waters that would soon engulf Veronica's carefully constructed world. Veronica, later that afternoon, feeling invigorated by the successful meeting, scrolled through social media on her phone, sipping a sparkling water. She saw posts about the Sterling Foundation's upcoming gala, articles praising her family's long-standing commitment to charity. She felt a surge of pride, a righteous sense of accomplishment. She had earned this, she truly believed. All her hard work, all her intelligence, all her inherited advantages, they coalesced into this image of the benevolent leader. What if everyone just took care of their own responsibilities? She mused internally. Then there wouldn't be any need for charity, really. Just efficient living. Have you ever judged someone based on their circumstances without knowing their story? Veronica certainly had. Her perceptions were sharp, but narrow, meticulously filtering out anything that challenged her worldview. She saw a maid, not a mother. A service worker, not a person navigating a complex life. Her judgment was swift and absolute, built on assumptions of competence and personal responsibility that conveniently overlooked the structural inequalities her own privilege was built upon. She genuinely believed her actions, however dismissive, were harmless, minor transgressions in the grand scheme of things, certainly not reflective of her true character. That evening, after a tiring but ultimately fulfilling day, Elena finally arrived home. Sophia greeted her with a hug that melted away the day's weariness. They made pupusas, filling the small apartment with the comforting aroma of corn and cheese. Later, after Sophia was asleep, Elena sat at her small, chipped kitchen table, a cup of herbal tea steaming beside her. She opened her laptop, a relic from a past charity drive. On a simple, anonymous blog, she wrote, her fingers moving slowly, deliberately across the keyboard. "Today, I picked up another coffee cup. It's a small thing, really. But sometimes these small things carry a lot of weight. Not the cup itself, but what it represents. The rush, the disregard, the feeling that some people exist only to clean up after others. But then, I also saw a little girl, no older than Sophia, hand her grandmother a wilting dandelion, like it was the most precious jewel, and a homeless man, sharing his last piece of bread with a stray dog. These moments, they are like tiny lights in the darkness. They remind me that kindness isn't always loud or accompanied by fanfare. It's often quiet, hidden, an act of pure grace. I hope one day, Sophia lives in a world where those quiet acts are seen, truly seen, for the powerful statements they are, and where people understand that a uniform doesn't make you invisible or less deserving of respect. It simply means you're doing your part, often the hardest part, to keep the world turning. She clicked publish, a whisper of defiance and hope in the digital ether. The post, small and unnoticed by the wider world, was her way of reclaiming her dignity, a subtle testament to the unwavering resilience that defined her. The preliminary feedback from the Reed Philanthropic Trust was, as Veronica expected, overwhelmingly positive. A brief, formal email from Dr. Evelyn Reed's executive assistant confirmed their interest in the Sterling Foundation's proposal and outlined the next steps. Veronica interpreted it as a green light, a triumphant validation of her foresight and strategic genius. She had known the partnership was a perfect fit, a merger of old money and sterling reputation with new-age philanthropic ambition. Her confidence soared, gleaming like the freshly waxed surface of her Bentley. That evening, she celebrated with a select group of her closest associates at the Gilded Lily, an exclusive downtown eatery known for its Michelin stars and its discretion. Amidst the clinking of crystal and the murmur of polite conversation, Veronica raised her glass. To impact, she declared, her smile radiant. To finally making a tangible difference. The Reed Trust, ladies and gentlemen, represents a monumental opportunity for us to truly elevate our work, to touch more lives, to foster a greater sense of community. Her words, carefully chosen, resonated with the privileged few around her, all of whom benefited, directly or indirectly, from the Sterling Foundation's largesse. She spoke passionately about a new initiative for revitalizing public spaces, about creating clean, safe environments for everyone. The irony of her earlier act remained completely lost on her, hidden beneath layers of self-congratulation. She truly believed she was a force for good, but not everyone was convinced. Dr. Evelyn Reed, typically a rare sight at such ostentatious gatherings, found herself at a separate charity gala later that week, an event for urban renewal, an ironic coincidence. Veronica was also there, dazzling in a bespoke gown, holding court by the champagne bar. Dr. Reed observed her from a distance, her gaze piercing through the glittering facade. She watched Veronica's effortless charm with a prominent city councilman, then witnessed her almost imperceptible eye roll when a junior aide, eager to please, fumbled with a tray of hors d'oeuvres. She saw the way Veronica engaged with the powerful, the influential, and the way her attention would subtly drift, her smile falter when speaking to anyone she deemed less relevant. It was a subtle, almost academic study of character, a micro-trigger in Dr. Reed's ongoing assessment. True character, Marcus was right, she mused, reveals itself in how one treats those who can do nothing for them. As fate would have it, Elena was also working that evening, one of her many side jobs to keep Sophia in her private charter school. She moved through the elegant hall, a phantom in her crisp white uniform, collecting discarded glasses and crumbs from tables, blending into the background. Her movements were efficient, her expression neutral. She didn't look up, didn't make eye contact, a practiced invisibility born of necessity. But as she rounded a corner, she glimpsed Veronica, bathed in the soft glow of a chandelier, her laughter echoing lightly. For a fleeting instant, Veronica's gaze swept over Elena, unseeing. It was a glance without recognition, without acknowledgement, simply passing through, as if Elena were merely another part of the decor. Elena felt a familiar dull ache in her chest. Not anger, not even resentment, just a profound sense of the impenetrable barrier between their two worlds. The opulent room, the glittering guests, the casual dismissiveness. It was all a part of a reality she inhabited, but could never truly enter. Later, as Veronica moved through the crowd, radiating a carefully cultivated warmth, she found herself face to face with Dr. Reed. "Veronica, Doctor," Reed said, her voice a low, cultured murmur, her eyes dark and intelligent, fixing on Veronica's with an unnerving intensity. "Your foundation's proposal is impressive, very comprehensive. Thank you, Dr. Reed. We believe in our mission wholeheartedly." Veronica offered her most practiced, sincere smile. Dr. Reed's gaze didn't waver. Indeed, philanthropy, at its core, is a deeply personal endeavor. Wouldn't you agree? It demands a certain, genuine connection to the human condition, an understanding that extends beyond the spreadsheet, perhaps even beyond the spotlight. Humility, I often find, is its most powerful ingredient. Veronica blinked. The question, seemingly innocent, held an unexpected edge. She felt a faint flicker of unease, a sensation she rarely experienced. Humility? She thought of her carefully constructed public image, her carefully chosen words. "Absolutely, Dr. Reed," she replied, her voice regaining its smooth cadence. "True impact, as you say, stems from a profound sense of empathy, a recognition of shared humanity. It's about listening, truly listening, to the needs of the community." She felt she had deftly sidestepped the implied criticism, her practiced rhetoric a shield. Dr. Reed merely offered a small, enigmatic smile. "Precisely," she said, and then moved on, leaving Veronica with a lingering, faint prickle of discomfort she quickly dismissed. Just Dr. Reed being Dr. Reed, she told herself. Intense, but brilliant. The slight unease, however, was a micro-trigger, a tiny crack in her certainty, a harbinger of the rising tension that would soon unravel her world. Away from the glittering crowd, Elena finished her shift. Her feet ached, but her spirit remained unbroken. She thought of Sophia, of the history project they'd been working on, a deep dive into the immigrant experience in New York. Elena found inspiration in those stories of resilience, of people building lives against immense odds. Later that night, curled up on her small sofa, she opened her blog. She wrote about the invisibility, the way people's eyes slide over you as if you're not there. It's strange sometimes to be in a room full of so much light and feel so utterly unseen, to hear conversations about community and humanity from people who wouldn't meet your gaze. It makes you wonder what kind of community they truly envision. But then, I remember my grandmother's stories, her quiet strength. She always said, "They can ignore your presence, but they cannot erase your value." And that stays with me. It's not about being seen by them, not really. It's about seeing yourself, about knowing your own worth, and fighting, in your own quiet way, to make sure your children are seen, truly seen, for all their beautiful potential. She closed her laptop, a quiet warrior in her own digital sanctuary, fueling her inner resolve for the battles ahead. The day Veronica had marked in her gilded planner, anticipating the final, glorious confirmation from the Reed Philanthropic Trust, dawned bright and deceptively serene. She arrived at her office, a penthouse suite commanding breathtaking views of the Manhattan skyline, with a lightness in her step. Today, her legacy would be cemented. Her assistant, a perpetually flustered young woman named Chloe, approached her desk with a tablet, her face unusually pale. "Ms. Sterling," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dr. Reed's office just called. They've sent an email, a formal withdrawal of their interest." Veronica's impeccably manicured hand, poised to sign a stack of documents, froze in midair. "A withdrawal? What are you talking about, Chloe? That's impossible. We were practically confirmed." Her voice was sharp, a sudden shard of ice in the warm office. Chloe stammered, scrolling rapidly. "The email, Ms. Sterling. It's from Dr. Reed herself. She states, fundamental misalignments in values and leadership philosophy. She regrets to inform us that the Reed Philanthropic Trust cannot proceed with the proposed partnership at this time." Veronica snatched the tablet. Her eyes scanned the concise, polite, yet utterly devastating words. Fundamental misalignments in values. The phrase hit her like a physical blow. Her meticulously crafted world, built on the solid ground of influence and financial power, suddenly felt like shifting sand. Fury ignited within her, hot and visceral. This wasn't just a rejection. It was an insult, a repudiation of everything she stood for, everything she believed she embodied. "Call her," she snapped, thrusting the tablet back at Chloe. "Get Dr. Reed on the phone, immediately. This is a misunderstanding, a grave error." Chloe, trembling slightly, tried. Dr. Reed's assistant, courteous but unyielding, explained that Dr. Reed was unavailable, traveling abroad for an urgent humanitarian mission, and would not be taking calls. The decision was final. Veronica felt a cold dread seep into her bones. This wasn't just a business setback. This was personal. But why? What values? What philosophy? She racked her brain, replaying every meeting, every interaction. Had she been too aggressive? Not charitable enough? The questions spun in her head, a dizzying carousel of confusion and indignation. A fleeting, unwelcome image flashed through her mind's eye. A crumpled coffee cup, sailing from her car window, landing with a soft thud on the pavement. The woman in the faded uniform, bending to pick it up. Veronica immediately banished the thought. Ridiculous. That was weeks ago. A tiny, insignificant incident, completely irrelevant. She dismissed it as a fleeting anomaly, a phantom of her subconscious trying to create a narrative where none existed. No, this had to be something political, some boardroom intrigue. Someone was trying to undermine her. The idea solidified, offering a comforting target for her anger. While Veronica stewed in her opulent office, Elena was experiencing a quiet triumph. She had received a letter from Sophia's school. Sophia had been awarded a full scholarship for next year, based on her academic excellence and exceptional community involvement. Tears welled in Elena's eyes as she hugged her daughter tightly. "Mi corazón," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You did it. You earned this." It was a small victory, yes, but for Elena, it felt monumental, a testament to years of quiet sacrifice and unyielding hope. She was unaware of the upheaval in Veronica's world, her own life moving forward, inch by painful inch toward a brighter future. The roles had, without Veronica's knowledge, completely reversed. Veronica, the powerful, the influential, was now the one being judged, found wanting, humbled by an unseen hand. Her carefully constructed facade of benevolence had been ripped away, not by a public scandal, but by a silent moral assessment. The invisible maid, whose discarded coffee cup had been picked up without a word, had, through her quiet dignity and an astute observer, become the unwitting catalyst for Veronica's professional downfall. Her public image, her very identity, now hung precariously in the balance, threatened by an act she hadn't even registered as an act. When the truth finally stares you down, do you choose pride or a chance at redemption? What would you do if everything you built was threatened by a single careless act that you deemed utterly insignificant? Veronica felt a profound sense of injustice, a primal urge to fight back, to reclaim her narrative. She couldn't fathom how a minor transgression, if it was even that, could possibly warrant such a severe professional blow. Her mind, conditioned by years of winning, refused to accept defeat. She spent the next few days in a relentless search for answers. She tasked Chloe with discreet inquiries, probing for any whispers of dissent within the Reed Trust, any rival foundations trying to sabotage her. Chloe's reports were inconclusive, filled with platitudes about Dr. Reed's unwavering integrity and her deep-seated belief in philanthropy rooted in genuine human connection. One evening, Chloe, looking utterly spent, mentioned a passing comment she'd overheard at a charity luncheon. Dr. Reed has always believed that a person's true measure isn't found in their grand gestures, but in the small, unobserved moments in how they treat the most vulnerable. The words, innocuous on their own, resonated with Veronica with an unsettling echo. Small, unobserved moments. She remembered the fleeting image of the coffee cup again, that silent, stoic figure bending down. A cold dread, far deeper than anger, began to bloom in the pit of her stomach. The dots, still hazy, were beginning to connect, forming a picture she desperately didn't want to see. The whispers, once mere background noise, began to coalesce into a chilling chorus. A former college acquaintance, now a mid-level executive at a rival foundation, casually mentioned a recent interview where Dr. Evelyn Reed spoke passionately about the responsibility of the privilege to uplift, not diminish, the dignity of every individual, especially those whose labor makes their world possible. Then, a sharp-eyed board member, noting Veronica's unusual distraction, obliquely remarked, "Evelyn has always had a keen nose for genuine character, Veronica. She sees beyond the balance sheets, right into the soul, I'd wager." Each comment, each subtle inflection, tightened the knot of dread in Veronica's stomach. The image of the discarded coffee cup, the quiet woman in blue, no longer fleeting, became an insistent, haunting presence. One sleepless night, scrolling aimlessly through news feeds and articles about philanthropy, she stumbled upon a small, unassuming blog post shared by a distant contact. The title was simple: "The Quiet Acts of Kindness and the Loud Acts of Disregard." As she read Elena's words, the anonymous, poignant reflections on invisibility, on finding dignity in small acts, on the fleeting hope for a daughter's future, a cold wave of realization washed over her. There was no direct mention of her, of the Mercedes, of the coffee cup, but the details, the specific emotion, the time frame, it was undeniable. Elena's blog was not a vengeful exposé, but a quiet, dignified testament to a life lived on the fringes of Veronica's world. This was the final, devastating piece of the puzzle. The discovery was not a thunderclap, but a slow, agonizing unraveling. Veronica saw it all now, with a clarity that was both horrifying and profoundly sickening. It wasn't a conspiracy. It wasn't sabotage. It was her. Her casual cruelty, her ingrained indifference, her profound lack of empathy. The prestigious partnership, the crowning achievement of her career, had been denied not because of a flawed proposal, but because of a crumpled coffee cup and a dismissive flick of her wrist. She hadn't merely littered. She had discarded a piece of her own humanity, and Dr. Reed, with her acute moral vision, had seen it all. The internal conflict raged. Her initial reaction was to rage against the perceived injustice, to blame Dr. Reed for being petty, for allowing such a trivial incident to derail a multi-million-dollar philanthropic endeavor. Surely the good she did, the money she gave, outweighed one thoughtless moment. But the insidious voice of truth, amplified by Elena's quiet blog post, refused to be silenced. She saw the privilege that had blinded her, the cocoon of wealth that had insulated her from the consequences of her actions. Her entire life, built on the assumption of her own inherent superiority, suddenly felt fragile, hollow. One afternoon, amidst this torment, she found herself rummaging through an old forgotten cedar chest in her attic, filled with family mementos. Tucked beneath layers of yellowed lace and brittle photographs, she found a small leather-bound diary and a handwritten letter addressed to her. It was from her grandmother, Eleanor Sterling, a woman Veronica had adored, a gentle soul who had instilled in her a vague sense of noblesse oblige that Veronica had long since twisted into entitlement. The letter, penned just before her grandmother's passing, spoke of the true meaning of their family's legacy. "My dearest Veronica," the elegant script read, slightly faded with time, "your grandfather and I always believed that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in the richness of one's character. It's in the kindness you show to a stranger, the respect you extend to every soul, no matter their station. Humility, my dear, is not a weakness. It is the strongest foundation for a life well lived. Remember, the true sterling legacy isn't built on what we own, but on how we choose to treat our fellow human beings. Be mindful of your actions, even the smallest ones, for they echo louder than any grand pronouncement." Veronica reread the words, her eyes stinging. The letter felt like a physical blow, a direct rebuke from the woman she revered most. Her grandmother's wisdom, once a distant echo, now resonated with painful clarity, directly contradicting every casual act of disrespect Veronica had ever committed. She saw her own arrogance reflected in the pristine surfaces of her penthouse, in the dismissive flick of her wrist, in her inability to truly see Elena. This voice from the past deepened the chasm between who she was and who she believed she should be. She stood before her bathroom mirror, the harsh overhead lights revealing every imperfection, every line of stress. She stared at her reflection, seeing not the polished, powerful woman she presented to the world, but a stranger, cold and brittle. The maid was not just a maid. Elena was a mirror, reflecting Veronica's deepest flaws. The humiliation of the Reed Trust rejection, the sting of her grandmother's words, the quiet dignity of Elena's blog, it all converged into a single agonizing truth. She was a hypocrite, a fraud. And the weight of that realization, the profound sense of self-disgust, was almost unbearable. This was the raw, visceral discovery of her own flaw, the moment her internal walls finally crumbled. The once insignificant act had now blossomed into a full-blown moral crisis, compelling her to consider a path she had never imagined. Driven by an agonizing cocktail of shame, guilt, and a desperate need for absolution, Veronica embarked on a search for Elena. It wasn't about damage control anymore. It was about a profound internal compulsion to face the woman she had so carelessly dismissed, to somehow, impossibly, make amends. Chloe, bewildered but loyal, eventually located Elena through an extensive network of community outreach programs Elena volunteered for. She was working a morning shift, exactly where Veronica had seen her weeks ago. The same small public park, the same bench, diligently sweeping leaves from the paving stones. Veronica arrived in a nondescript sedan, dismissing Arthur. She wore a simple, unadorned cashmere sweater and jeans, a deliberate attempt to shed the armor of her privilege. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She saw Elena, her back to the street, her movements as rhythmic and focused as before. Taking a deep, fortifying breath that felt inadequate, Veronica approached. "Elena?" she managed, her voice surprisingly hoarse. Elena turned, broom in hand, her eyes widening slightly in recognition. Not anger, not even surprise, just a quiet, wary acknowledgement. "Ms. Sterling," she said, her voice soft, respectful. Veronica swallowed hard, the words catching in her throat. I came to apologize." Her gaze dropped to the ground, unable to meet Elena's steady stare. For that day. The coffee cup. Everything. It was thoughtless. Arrogant. I was wrong, Elena. Profoundly wrong." The carefully constructed composure she had maintained her entire life shattered, crumbling under the weight of her confession. Tears pricked at her eyes, blurring the edges of the park. It was not a performance. It was a genuine, gut-wrenching admission of guilt. Elena listened, her expression unreadable. She didn't interrupt, didn't flinch. When Veronica finally looked up, her face streaked with tears, Elena simply nodded. "I remember," she said, her voice still quiet. It was a small thing for you, perhaps, but for me, it was a reminder. A reminder of what? Veronica whispered, desperate for understanding. Of how easily some people forget that others are people, that we all deserve respect. Elena paused, her gaze sweeping over the pristine park she worked so hard to maintain. I have a daughter, Sophia. I work hard so she never has to feel invisible. Veronica flinched, the words echoing Elena's blog post. I want to help, Veronica blurted out, desperation lacing her voice. A job at the foundation, a scholarship for Sophia, anything. Elena shook her head gently. Sophia has a scholarship already. She earned it. And I have my work. What I want, Ms. Sterling, is what everyone wants. To be seen, to be treated with dignity, to know that my efforts, however small they seem, are valued. Her quiet grace, her refusal to be bought or appeased, was a far more powerful rebuke than any angry outburst. It stripped Veronica of her last defense, her ability to fix problems with money. This was the climax. Veronica's polished facade utterly disintegrated. She crumpled onto the park bench, her shoulders shaking with sobs. It wasn't just about Elena. It was about every dismissive glance, every thoughtless word, every moment of casual cruelty she had inflicted on anyone she deemed beneath her. It was the crushing weight of her grandmother's letter, Dr. Reed's silent judgment, and Elena's quiet, unwavering dignity. The rich woman, once so secure in her power, was now broken, humbled by the woman she had once deemed unworthy of a second glance. It was her emotional breakdown, a public unraveling in the most private of settings. In the months that followed, Veronica Sterling began a painful, arduous journey of transformation. She stepped down from her prominent role at the Sterling Foundation, announcing her intention to focus on a new grassroots initiative dedicated to workers' rights and fair labor practices in her city, particularly for service industry workers. She poured her considerable intellect and resources into it, not with the goal of securing accolades, but with a genuine, quiet commitment to the mission. The financial partnership with the Reed Philanthropic Trust never materialized, a permanent loss. But in its place, Veronica found something far more valuable, a nascent sense of integrity, hard-won and fragile. Elena, through Sophia's scholarship, saw her daughter thrive, her own quiet fight for dignity vindicated not by revenge, but by the ripple effect of a single, careless act that had, against all odds, birthed a new purpose. Veronica had lost some of her public prestige, her unblemished image, but she was slowly, painfully, rebuilding herself, one brick of empathy at a time. The ending was ambiguous. Justice had been served in its own quiet way, but the scars of her past remained, a constant reminder of the price of privilege. And sometimes the real lessons aren't found in a boardroom, but in a crumpled coffee cup and the quiet dignity of the person who picks it up. The Sterling name still shone in the city's skyline, but Veronica's heart, once hardened by privilege, had been irrevocably cracked, then, perhaps, slowly, painstakingly, polished by the truth, forever changed by the invisible woman she had once disregarded.